I'm excited. You know why I'm excited? It's because I'm making a game. But there's a catch to it. It's not that simple. It's a game on my own engine that barely has any features. And we're going to start this project just like we start any other project. We're going to create a new branch on our favorite version control software. I have been trying to make my own game engine using C++ and SDL for some time now, and I have restarted it a couple times, but recently I made the promise to myself that I'll not restart it again. And I know that eventually I'll be rewriting features so much that it's pretty much restarting the thing all over again, but it doesn't matter because I ran out of pop music albums to name my engines after, so I cannot. Restarting is not an option. So this game that I'm going to make is going to be roughly inspired by the infamous Flappy Bird. And I'm also taking some inspiration on some videos, like the video Making a Game in 1 Hour Using My Engine by the channel, and also the video Making a Game in 1 Hour by Danny. Is that the name? Sounds like it. But I'm not making the game in 1 hour, I'm making it in whatever much time I need, actually. The only difference here is that the game will not be about birds and will not be about rockets or even about glowing and exploding things. The game will be about ASCII art. I wanted to start by making a square appear on screen, and I made it green because why not? And that's where the first issue with my engine appears. I don't have a generic way to render sprites on screen. So there I go, making a sprite render component that is a component that can render sprites. And then I have to create the meaty gameplay mechanics, which is clicking so the player can go up, I guess, and falling. Falling sounds like physics. And that's another thing, my engine does not have physics. I don't care about physics, to be honest. So I would just have fake gravity. That should work well enough. And with some adjustments, some iteration, some fixes here and there, I finally have a square going up and down. But a game is not a game if you don't have a loose condition. I need something that the player can collide with and die. If you think of it, all I needed was a texture and a collision delimited by a box. And when I asked myself, what should an obstacle be like? That's when I had the idea of making all the game based on ASCII art. With some experimentation and some major rework on how I render fonts, I was able to have a texture that was a bunch of X. And then it was time. It was time to get into making collisions. The system that I'm using has a collision word that is responsible to keep track of all things in the game that can collide. And after everything in the game updates, then the collision word will check for collisions and take care of all that. Checking for collisions is boring and expensive. You have to go through every collider and check if they overlap with any other collider. But nothing's as simple as that. You might have to ask, what does it even mean to overlap? I'm using a simple method of detecting collisions that is called axis-aligned bouncing boxes, or AABB for short. To simplify things a little bit, think of AABB as a 2D box that does not involve rotation in any way. And surprisingly or not, it actually works really well for 2D games. You don't need anything fancier than that. The collision algorithm consists of checking if two boxes does not intersect based on their coordinates. And by checking when the boxes does not intersect, we happen to know when they do intersect. And if they intersect, we just send a message to two box colliders that happen to, well, collide. I hope I didn't bore you talking about collisions, because things are about to get exciting. Let's see what have we got so far. I have a character going up and down, and it can collide with stationary obstacles. So what I need to do right now is to have those obstacles moving through the screen. And I need to move those obstacles from the right to the left, but I also have to randomize it on the vertical axis, so it's always on a different position. Moving it from the right to the left is actually pretty simple. I just need to change the obstacle's position a little bit every frame. And the rest is just a matter of tweaking the speed I want it to move. And once I'm moving the obstacle, I just have to reposition it when it goes out of the screen. And when I reposition it, that's also when I want to change the vertical position. The game was feeling a little bit too easy at this point, so I went ahead and added collisions to the bottom, top, adjusted velocities and all that. Basically, I was balancing the game. What I currently have resembles a game at least in some way, but we're lacking a very basic thing. We need to show the player some sort of score, and tracking score is fairly easy, right? I just need to add a collision where I want the player to earn points and then increment whatever point variable I have into it. Should be pretty easy, right? If you ever try to make a game, you definitely already face the problem where you have to check if a collision is happening, but only when it starts to happen. And usually the answer to that is that the engine will provide 3 types of collision checking: on collision enter, on collision stay, and on collision exit. Now, I could just left the game like that. Higher numbers looks better, right? But I'll need to add those things to the engine anyway someday in the future, so I might as well just do it now. So brace yourselves, we're going back to collision land. The way I implemented this is not very complicated, but it does require some labor. First, instead of having just one collision callback, we need 4 different ones. So here's the plan. We need to start a list with the collisions that happened on the previous frame and on the current frame. And with that, we can make all sorts of assumptions. If a collision is just on the previous frame collision, we call on collision exit. If a collision is just on the current frame collisions, we call on collision enter. And if it's on both, we call on collision stay. But we might be asking, how do we store a collision itself? For that, I created a simple structure that just holds 2 colliders. And then with some major reorganization, I can finally distinguish what kind of collision is happening. And then I can just bind the correct function to on collision enter, and I can track points the way I always intended to. We're almost there, we just need to do 2 more things. We need to show points to the player, and we need to restart the player. We need to restart the game when the player dies. Using fonts in OpenGL is kind of annoying. I have a font class that uses STL2 type font to load fonts into the engine, but that's not all of the story. I have to then use the font to create a texture with the specific text, with the specific size that I want. Which means that yes, if you want to change either the text or the size, we have to recreate the texture, which is very expensive. So the way I'm going to do this is having a reference to the points texture that I'll always be rendering on screen. And then I'll be watching the player points. And when it changes, I just have to delete the old texture and recreate it. And when the player dies, I can actually do something very similar. When the player collides, I can just set it as dead and check it. And then I recreate the texture with the words game over. I can even use the same texture. And then, as for the final step, we just need to restart the game when the player dies. And there's not much secret to it really, and I won't get into detail because this video is probably already long enough. Basically, we have to destroy every entity and colliders, restart the difficulty of the game, recreate everything and unpause the game. And with that, this is actually a simple game done with an engine that has barely anything into it. I hope you liked this video and didn't notice that I recorded it over 3 different days, I guess. And I'll see you when I make another video. Who knows when that might be. I don't know.